Ladies and gentlemen, joining me here on Rappin on Racing is a hobby stock driver from Pittsburgh's Pennsylvania Motor Speedway. He is Matt Benard. Matt, welcome to Rappin on Racing. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. Happy to have you on here. Tell you what, it's been really fun watching you over these past few years. You know, I started coming to the racetrack in 2020, and you were just kind of cutting your teeth. And then 2021, a good upcoming season. 2022, a brilliant season. And it seems like to me that you've really gotten the hang of this racing thing. So we'll talk to you a lot more about your career here. But first, before we get started into the now, let's go ahead and start into where it all started in the first place. So tell me how you got into racing.
Well, me and my dad used to go to races and stuff. And like my dad used to do demolition derby. So I was always around race cars and I always wanted to do racing at some point. And my mom didn't really want me to do that. So we would go to the racetrack a lot and we ended up finding the deal on a car and we started from there. I started with a bone stock engine and we just worked our way up with everything we have now.
Okay. So a few things to break away from that one. I guess we'll get started with your dad. You said he did demolitions. Any racing heritage from your grandfathers or anything?
No, not really. Not that I know of, other than my dad doing the demolition derby. That's about it.
Where did he do those at?
He would go all over. Like he'd go to Washington County Fair. He did it at New Alexander. A couple different places, but
so
yeah, it was fun.
So racing never really was in the forte besides demos until. So what led to that decision? So obviously the natural route at that point is your dad has this pretty much investment into demolition derbies. But where does the decision come to go to racing rather than demolitions?
Well, I came along, and that's when demolition went away. And then I got older, and me and my dad wanted to get a hobby. And when I was young, we started with RC cars, and we would race RC cars. And then our track closed down. The owner passed away, and the track closed down. So we got away from that, and then we wanted to find a new hobby, and that's when we started going back to the track again. And that's when we got back into the racing. And we were actually at a race. My dad looked at me, and he goes, "So you ready to drive a car yet?" And I said, "I'm ready." And then that's when we ended up getting one.
So RC cars, where did you race those at?
Oh, it was up by Lernerville, up in Sarver, PA.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that's cool. So was it like carpet or what did you guys race on?
Oh, it was dirt. It was a dirt track.
So how long did you guys do RC cars for?
Oh, I'd say a few years. I can't remember just how many, but a few years we did it for.
How old were you around?
Oh, I'd say 10, 12, around there.
And how long did you do it for?
I'd say at least 3 years, I think.
Do you have any connections that you made from racing RC cars to maybe racing now?
Not really. Not through RC cars. That was like a whole different thing. Nobody was really into racing when it came to that. But we ended up, one of our coworkers was a race car driver. He had my first car is actually who we bought it off of, was my coworker. And he was kind of getting annoyed with the car, so he ended up putting it up for sale, and that's how I ended up getting my first car. But
so how old were you when that happened?
Well, let's see. I've been racing. This will be my 5th year, I think. So I think I was 14 when I first got the car.
And that was the hobby stock that you currently own now?
No, this is my second car.
Okay.
My first car ended up getting wrecked.
So 14 years old, jump right into a hobby stock. Typically the transition there is go-karts, or in the instance of Pittsburgh, it's Young Guns or something along those lines. But you just jump right into a full-size rear-wheel drive Monte Carlo.
Yeah, I was ready to drive. And like me and my dad doesn't like the 4-cylinder stuff. He's like, if you're going to drive a race car, it's got to be a V8 and it has to be rear-wheel drive. So that's what we ended up getting, and that was the easiest and cost-effective class that we could get into. And I like it because I like older cars. It looks better. I think it's more interesting watching them go around.
Yeah, there certainly is an attraction to that classic Monte Carlo body style. They can identify that with a race car any day of the week, which is interesting because you see the diverse amount of race cars nowadays, but that for some reason that classic Monte Carlo is what sticks out to a lot of people. So I can see where you get that point from.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just different. I mean, I would love to race a higher up class, but it's just something about the Monte Carlos that I can't get away from.
So you mentioned that first car. You mentioned
hmm
it buying off of a coworker. Who was that coworker?
John Dotton.
Okay, so did he used to run at Pittsburgh, or where was
Yeah,
he
he raced at
traditionally at?
Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah, he raced at Pittsburgh.
So did you? It's funny because for me, there's a lot of people whose names I'm not familiar with, and normally when I come across them, it's from going through history and records from the track previously. So there's still a lot of names that I am just not familiar with, and I should be. But as I interview the current drivers now, especially in the hobby stock divisions, these names start popping up because they used to be the ones that used to own these cars that are still racing on the track today. So it is really interesting to me in that aspect, and you're no exception to that rule.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
cool.
definitely different. Yeah.
So how long did you have that first car for?
Um, I want to say 2 years. I think I had it for 2 years.
And
Yeah.
and what was the deciding? What was the unfortunate incident that brought that car's life to an end?
Well, we were coming around turn 1 and 2, and I hit, I ended up spinning some reason, and I was sitting on the track waiting for the yellow to come out, and another car came and T-boned me right in the driver's side, and it shifted my seat on top of the shifter. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's a bad
Yeah,
wreck. That's a bad. And how
yeah.
old were you at this point? What, 16,
Oh,
15?
yeah, I'd say so. Yeah,
Goodness gracious. So you're
yeah,
as if your mother wasn't worried enough as it was. She probably was she
yeah.
at the track that night? Did she see that all happen?
No, my mom wasn't at the track that night.
Well, that's probably for the better.
Yeah, she wasn't happy when she seen it the next morning on a trailer.
how, how'd you feel the next morning?
Oh, it was rough. It hurt a little bit. I ain't gonna lie.
How long did it take
But
you to get back behind the wheel?
I was ready to build another car the next night. We ended up going and looking at one.
How long did it
Danny
take?
Rich.
Okay, here we
Uh,
go.
we
Here we go.
Danny Rich. Danny Rich came up to us that night and said, "I got a chassis sitting in the weeds. Come look at it and tell me what you think." And we ended up going up there and looking at it. And I paid $500 for that chassis, and we built it from the ground up, basically. And that's the car I have right now.
Okay. How long roughly did that take you guys to get from
We
bare
bu-
chassis to completion?
Well, we actually built that car in 3 nights. And that same time we built that car, I lost my grandfather on that
Mm,
same week. So that was a real rough week for us. And we ended up making on the racetrack on Saturday night. We started on Wednesday and worked every night until we were working on it Saturday until 5 o'clock. And we were loading up at 5 o'clock, making it to the racetrack. And it was funny because when I first went out on the racetrack, I had no power steering and my ball joints were about to fall out of the car because we didn't have time to check all that. And then
yeah.
I came back in the pits, and then we come to find out that it wasn't the power steering. The Heim joints, from sitting so long in the weeds, they needed to be lubed up. My arms were burning so bad. It was crazy.
My gosh, there's that appreciation again for those '80s styles race cars. Those are the things
Yeah,
like just sitting in the weeds. You wouldn't think about like you will never have that problem in a Rush late model or a sprint car, respectively. But
yeah,
those are the things you're going to encounter in that division. So that's really
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy.
You talk about guys that help get you your start. Danny Rich, you talk about a wily
hmm
veteran, a guy that's been around the block a few times, especially at Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
To have
hmm
a guy like that at your disposal too, to pick his brain, that's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice having those guys to help us out. I mean, like when I first started, Carly actually came over at the first week and talked to me, which was pretty cool because I never talked to another race driver really before other than John, which he wasn't really that much into it. Like he was into it, but he didn't really have the time and he wasn't at the track every week. So it was nice to have someone come up to us and then invite us over to their corner and help us get along. Like Danny Rich, Joe Anthony, Jake Simmons. Jake Simmons still helps me on my car nowadays. Like, it's crazy because when I first met Jake, the first thing he said to me is, "You drive too much like me."
And,
That was
and,
the first thing he said to me.
and what is that like for those who don't know?
Like, we let it all out. We had no fear, basically. So it's wide open all the time. As soon as that helmet goes on, it's like a switch flips in the head.
Well, that's not unfamiliar because I mean, there's plenty of drivers like that through the history of racing. One that comes immediately to mind is Steve Kinzer. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like right before the races, you just didn't talk to the guy, and especially when he had that
Nope.
helmet on, you just let him be. And then whenever
Yep.
he's time to come down and flip that switch back off, it was okay.
Yep.
But in
Yep.
between that time of that light switch being on, you just didn't talk, and you just let
Yep.
him do his thing. So, are you at least a little bit more reserved in that matter? You kind of
A little bit.
yeah,
Yeah, a little bit.
well, that's good. And you talk about, again, you just mentioned Jake Simmons. I think he's like the all-time winningest driver in the hobby stock division. I think it's either that or Sheltman, but I mean, or
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
yeah, if
Still,
not,
I don't think Shelby beat him yet.
yeah, I don't think so either. So I mean, Jake Simmons, another one of those drivers who, man,
Yeah.
especially at your disposal, that's absolutely
Yep.
wonderful.
Yep. It's nice to have those guys. Like I said, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today if I didn't have those guys' help.
You had mentioned going to the track before getting involved actually in the racing side of things. Had you been going to Pittsburgh as a fan your entire life prior to that, or when did you start going to Pittsburgh as a fan?
I've been going to. My dad used to. Well, my uncle Mo, that actually helped us with the car every week. He actually used to work at that track when Nick Guerin owned it.
Okay.
And he would come out and clean it up on the weekends. And like when he would during the racing on Saturday nights, my dad he would let my dad in, and my dad would go in and watch all the time. So my dad was always there. And then when I came along, my dad and mom would always take me to the track, and we'd watch the races and stuff every once in a while when we could. But
so that's pretty cool. So I mean, just to be there as a kid and then eventually become, a driver at the track that you grew up idolizing people racing on, and at the time you're probably not even young or old enough at the time of you watching to appreciate some of the drivers who you got to watch. And I can think of the same thing,
yeah.
but you start seeing, as you start racking up some wins, you start seeing these names that you're catching up to in the record books. And that's got to be a pretty cool feeling too.
Yeah. It's crazy to see that, like, knowing all the people that raced on that track and that being able to go out and race on it yourself is just, it's crazy. Like even knowing, like going back in the day, like back when that track was over in Heidelberg, it's crazy to know that all those older people raced on it.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about legends of the sport, plain and simple, not just Western Pennsylvania racing, but legends of the sport, the Petties. I mean, the Scotts. I mean, I'm forgetting a lot of names here, but but ironically, we talk about Heidelberg, and we are actually, as of this year, 1973 was the final year of racing at Heidelberg Speedway. So this is the 50th year since the closing of Heidelberg Speedway. So, and a lot of that history still remains at the track today. So it is kind of like a historical landmark, just by virtue of it moving locations over years, and still most of the remnants of it still remaining today.
Yeah, it's just amazing to still have that track with us today and be able to race on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about what your progress from your standpoint has been through those early stages. You get past those first couple of years with that first car, and now you're onto the second car. And it seems like to me, since the adaptation of that second car, that you've really come long ways, and you've started making leaps and bounds, process strides to getting yourself up into the top 5 contention on a consistent basis. Do you feel that that's pretty much where you're at this point?
We're trying to be there. I still think we need to push a little bit harder, but as a team, we're working as hard as we can. And it's just, it all comes down to who wants to work more, who wants it more, basically, is what it is. And we're trying as hard as we can, and it's cutting it close, but we're getting there. We're trying.
In what ways do you think that you need to work harder?
Like, I don't know. I need to get better as a driver, learn how to be smoother under the wheel. Um, uh, like work harder in the garage, like check the car over more, um, do better prep, just focus on different things, pay more attention. I don't know, be more. I don't know what I'm trying to say, really.
Well, I think a lot of it is time, right? I think that a lot of people who you talk to, one of the separations oftentimes is the amount of time that they're just putting into it, period. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's on a weekly basis or a daily basis, where you're
Hmm.
going into the shop 3, 4, 5 hours a night just to nut and bolt everything, make sure everything's good, and put the car on scales, see where you're at, and making adjustments here and there. But then there's also that balance of trying to make it so you're not overdoing everything and not overthinking everything and over
Hmm.
speculating what needs to be done to a car, whether it's prior to a week, prior to a race, whatever it may be. Have you come across any of that in your trials and tribulations over the past couple of years?
Yeah, we definitely have. Like me and my dad will go back and forwards on trying different things and doing different things to the car, and then we'll always go back to putting it back to how it was because we just didn't like it, or I didn't like the feel of it, but my dad thought it was working. It's just back and forwards. But I think we've finally found a neutral point where we're really good. I just need to tweak a little bit from there, basically.
Yeah, a good starting point where it's a pretty much a consistent, this is where we're going to start. And then depending
Hmm.
on whatever challenges present us, track conditions or weather or whatever it may be, you have a
Yeah,
good idea of where to at least start and adjust
yeah,
from there if necessary.
yeah, yeah. It's basically what it comes down to, like you said, putting in the hours and the time. And like I said, I work a full job, every all day, every week, 9 to 6. So being able to come home at 6 o'clock and it's dark out and it's like, ugh, don't want to go outside and work after you eat dinner and get ready for bed and you're just tired. You don't want to go out and work on it, but you got to get the time. You got to have the time to do it. That's what it. That's what it's all about.
So what's it like for you at home? Do you have a garage that you can work on the car in, or are you one of those guys that's got to work outside and work out in the elements?
I work under my pool. I have like a back patio we work on. We put the car on the back patio. We just recently, like I had an awning under there, and then just recently I bought wood and we put a box in for it right now. And I temporarily got a tarp hanging over it. I still got to extend it a little bit more, and then we're gonna put a garage there, and that's gonna be our workspace for now. But before, when I first started, we do it out in the driveway. I mean, right in the driveway, be working on the car, and that's where the car would sit and everything
I think it's.
because
Oh,
I didn't
go
really
ahead.
have anywhere to put it. I
Yeah.
didn't like. I have a car garage, but it's so small you can only fit like a lawn tractor in there, so it sucks. But I'm trying to make do with what we have.
And that's the beauty of grassroots racing. You got these
Yeah,
guys that have that luxury of having a nice garage and having the ability to work within it, but also you have to adapt if you just don't have it. But that drive and that passion is really what's the beauty in this sport is you got guys that
yeah,
don't really necessarily have the means or have the luxury of some others, but nonetheless they still show up to this track and they still contend with them on a weekly basis, such as yourself. You know, you don't got this beautiful garage that you can work in. However, you do have the drive and determination to make it happen. And in the results this year from 2022, top 5 in points, it's not too shabby.
no, I wish we would have been. I wish we could have stayed up and wouldn't have had those failures we had. But it is what it is. It's still. I'm happy with top five. I don't. Me personally, I don't go out for a top five. If we put the car on the trailer every night, I'm happy. If nothing goes wrong, it's a good night. I'm happy.
Yeah, and that's pretty, especially in today's economy too, where
Yeah.
it's tough to get parts, it's tough to pay for things, it's tough to afford to do this in the general. Putting it
Mhm.
on the trailer, putting it with all four wheels,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
that's a huge win in itself. But if you can contend in
Yeah.
those top 5 situations, or heck, even park it on the front stretch in victory lane, that's even better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice, just trying to keep the car in one piece and just get better as a driver, basically.
Going back real quick before we move on to 2022 and talking about your previous season here, you did mention work, and we were talking just a little bit before the interview, but I said, wait, let's go ahead and save this. But one of the things is you mentioned your 9 to 6 work schedule. What is it that you do for work?
I'm a mechanic at Byber's Garage.
Okay.
We also do towing too. So like I'll go out on tows every once in a while.
And you work with your dad, right?
Yeah, my dad works at the garage too.
Yeah. How does that working relationship go?
Here and there, it's not. It's back and forth. We argue every once in a while, but you have that when you work with your parents.
That's what I was gonna say. You have that back and forth growing up as a child. It's just natural. I had it with my dad. Everybody, I'm sure, has some sort of experience with that. But the situation kind of changes whenever you're working with your father. I also used to work with my father for a time, luckily in different departments, so we really never had any direct interaction with one another, and that was probably for the best because I couldn't imagine what that would blow up to be. Uh, but in this instance, it seems like you're pretty much working hand in hand with your dad in some cases.
Yeah, we're pretty much right next to each other all day, unless he has to go on a tow and I'm working in the shop. But other than that, we're normally right next to each other working.
So life at work, life at good between you and your dad, life with racing between you and your dad, all good.
Yeah, it's going great. I mean, we're trying to keep it together and keep it going.
I think it's great that you guys have that ability to bond over something like that. And speaking of bonding with father-son relationships, at the World of Wheels car show, you were parked front and center right next to the PPMS booth, right next to Jared Miley's car, but then also the family next to you, the Kokalises, Gavin and Matt Kokalis. You talk about a family there that has that special bond through racing as well. They're no exception to that. The Catalises were parked right next to them. Yep. Father and son. So this is a family thing. This is a family tradition for a lot of you guys. And again, you're no exception.
Yeah. It's great to see it passed down and other people actually getting into the sport. I'm glad to see the sport's not dying off and that people are still getting into it.
Yeah, I agree. So 2022, I wanted to jump back to it. Here we are. What a year. What a year. You have to be thrilled about it. You start the year off. I believe it was your career first win on opening night. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So look at that. Right off the rip, you're setting yourself up for a very poised season, leading the points championship, which talk about the most entertaining points race of the season out of any of the divisions of Pittsburgh. You were front and center pretty much the entire year long, right along for the ride, putting us through good entertainment. So what was that like through the first few weeks, first few months of the racing season for you? Coming off of that win, did you kind of ride on those high hopes for a while, or were you kind of getting a little bit frustrated in the fact that you couldn't quite get back to victory lane in a quick manner, or were you just happy with that first one, but the focus was to remain consistent and contend for points?
I was happy with that first win, but I knew we still needed to work more and work harder to get faster, to be able to stay up and beat these guys consistently, I should say.
Consistency is the biggest thing, but what makes it difficult is there's consistency is always big because there's divisions that don't quite have the numbers where it honestly just takes just being consistent and showing up and you're going to be a front contender. But in the case of the hobby stock division, it's a much different story because literally the difference of finishing 10th or 11th or 12th one night is the difference between you finishing first and fourth in points. And it doesn't seem like that, but it can come down to that. There is that points drop after, I think, 10 races. There is a points drop, but nonetheless, every race is just as important as the last.
Yeah. Well, see, and then last year, like I missed a couple races, and then I had Jake drive for me that one night, and he didn't do so good, which is all right. I mean, the car stayed in one piece. I was happy, but that kind of hurt us for points a little bit too. So that didn't really help us any, but
it's still good though, because it's better than taking the zero right off the rip.
Yeah.
At least it gives you a little bit of luxury where if you do have to drop a zero for any reason or drop a very low score, at least he was there to help rebound, and it's better than the alternative of just not showing up. So, and again, Jake Simmons, not a bad hand.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just a little rusty. Haven't been in a car for a while.
And I'm sure too the idea that it is not his equipment. He doesn't want to be the guy to go out and wreck your stuff, and then it takes you totally out of contention for the points as well.
Yeah. Yeah, he was nervous. He was hitting the brakes a lot. I kept telling him not to touch the brakes, but he wouldn't listen.
So what was the reason for you having to miss? Was it an injury related thing, or
My girlfriend's graduation party. I had to go to that, so I
that
had to have
is
him run it for me.
that is important. That is
Yeah,
important. So
yeah.
how long have you been dating your girlfriend for?
We're coming on 4 years now.
Good for you guys. That's impressive,
Yeah,
especially through high school and everything.
yeah.
High school sweethearts.
Nah, yeah, kinda ish.
Yeah, kinda. Valentine's Day is coming up, buddy. What are you gonna do?
I'm not sure yet. I'm getting there.
So is she still in high school, or are you both graduated now?
We both graduated.
Okay. And speaking of that, we never really touched on that at all, but you just graduated last year from high school. So you're still pretty new to just being simply on the workforce, not having to balance work, school, racing, everything else. A
Hmm.
little bit of a relief on that end.
Yeah, it's a lot easier on me. I mean, being at work all the time now is hard, but
Yeah.
it's not. I'd rather be at work and then be at school. I mean, like I said, I felt like I'd learn more at work than I do at school. That's how I feel, but
I
I
think
don't know.
I think there's a level of appreciation now looking back at it as I enter my 30s. Like it's just like, man, it was just life was just so much easier in high school, and you just kind of take it for granted. And then you join the workforce, and you're like, oh man, it starts to become a grind. But at the same token, though, if you love what you do, and it seems like you really enjoy what you're doing with auto mechanics, it makes it a lot
Yeah,
easier.
yeah. I love working on cars. I mean, that's what I grew up doing, and I was always like when I was a kid, I would always tinker on little things. I used to tear apart tractors and stuff like that, and put them all back together and get them running. And I I can't tell you how many weed whackers I had. My mom used to drive me nuts because I'd go through trash and pick out weed whackers and fix them and tear them apart, and she'd go crazy about it because we'd have like 15 weed whackers laying in the yard, and all tore apart. But yeah, it's I don't know. I was always into it, and I just love tearing things apart and putting them back together and fixing it.
So what's interesting to me is that is your preference, right? To tear apart weed whackers, fix them, put them back together, work on cars, fix them, put them back together. The common tradition anymore is kids, and I use kids respectively, but I should say people of your age. But when you were a kid, though, with respect, you were tearing apart stuff, and you're still doing it now. So
Yeah.
people of your age typically tend to lean toward technology or video games. Is that something that ever entertained you, or has that never really been of interest to you?
I had video games. I was never into it. I was always an outdoors kid. I mean, I'd come home. As soon as I came home, it was go in, get changed, put on your play clothes, and go outside. That's what I got. So, and then I'd be outside until it was dark, and I'd come back home.
There you go.
That's I was always outside doing something, whether it was riding a bike, playing, running in the woods, whatever. I was always doing something outside.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Like that's pretty much, I mean, I had video games growing up. I'm not going to lie to you, but
Yeah,
also there was that time of going outside and just adventuring, and I'm sure kids today still do that. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like more and more you look at it. I think that's just the technology, the screens are really what draw to people, and kids, younger kids today. You talked about racing not dying, and you're happy that you're seeing it's not dying. It's people such as yourself that are help keeping that sport alive, and I'm too refreshed that kids like Gavin Kukalis and these young gun competitors, Sadie Snatchko, Zoe Knight, Emmy Laboon, who just moved up, they're continuing that interest as well. And I'm not forgetting any of the young gun competitors. It just can't name them all because again, a blessing. We have so many.
yeah, yeah. It's just great to see that the sport's still there and people aren't getting away from it.
We got a little off topic there. We were talking about your 2022 season and kind of dived down a wormhole there, but here we are back at it. Let's go ahead and talk about what was to come. So, first couple of months coming off of that win, everything was going pretty good, consistent. Have to miss 1 week for a graduation party, but when does that second win come about?
Oh, I can't remember when that second win was.
I want to say it was mid-season,
I think it was mid-season.
and for some reason, the date that race with the Boss Sprint cars where it just rained all morning long and then turned out to that we still raced. Was that a night that you got a win? I can't remember. It was a real heavy track.
I don't think so. No, I think Catellus won that night. Gary or Logan won that night.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So inevitably, though, you probably don't win. I think there was 3 wins. Am I correct?
Yeah, 3 wins that season.
So do you remember where the third one came from?
I know the third one was towards the end of the season. Oh, yeah. The third one was a really good one, actually, because that was the night when my cousin, Mark Corio, the 14 car, rolled his car and my engine blew up. That next week, we ended up taking his engine out of my car, which is considerably, everybody would say, a smaller engine, because we didn't give him as much power as I did because he's still learning. So we put that in my car and came out the next week. And me being frustrated over everything that happened last week and just agitated because of everything that's going on, I just went out and wheeled that car. And that's when I had almost a half a track lead on the whole field.
Yeah, so that's I wanted to bring Mark into this conversation at some point, but you kind of just introduced him. But I mean, let's go ahead and just touch on that race there, your third and final victory of the season, a very emotional win for you. It sounds like. I'm sorry for not remembering your the dates of your 3 wins, but nonetheless, the importance of that third win really stands out. Would you say out of the 3 wins that was probably the most meaningful, most important to you so far of your career?
Yeah, that one definitely meant the most to me, to be able to come back the next weekend and dominate. I mean, I was just happy because of everything that went on. Just having bad luck that weekend and then coming back out with stuff that wasn't even mine and being able to park in a victory lane just made me happy.
I remember having that conversation with you and your dad, and I believe it was your uncle too, just about the whole situation. You know, Mark's car is junk, but we got the motor out of the car. It was salvageable. This motor blew up, and we're going to put Mark's motor in. I remember vividly having that conversation now that you mention it, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together that was the night of your third victory. So that's really impressive. Really not knowing what's going to happen once you put that motor in the car, how it's going to react. You know, if it weighs any different, what that's going to do for your. You know, did you even put the car on scales after you put a new engine in it? Did you do anything different?
Put the motor in it, started up, it ran, it got loaded in the trailer, and was ready to go.
So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I was glad to be able to go out and do that. I mean, like I said, I kind of impressed myself being able to go out and do that, honestly.
So coming into the final points night of the season, you were still, I think, mathematically in contention, though at that point it was pretty obvious that it was going to be down to 3 between Tony Frank McGill and Logan Catellus. At that point, you were 4th in points, mathematically still possible. However, you now have to kind of hope for 3 drivers to basically not even show up at that point, and you knew that just wasn't going to happen. But nonetheless, to have yourself in a top 5 position going into the final night of points, and if I'm not mistaken, that final night of points racing, you were pretty much in the front seat watching the whole thing. I think you were 3rd that night, and you were watching Frank and Logan battle it out for the points championship. So, I mean, you were still in it the entire time, and you were front and center through the whole process.
Yeah, like I said, we don't really race for points. Like, that's not really what I'm there for. I'm just there to race and be able to be competitive. I like door-to-door racing. It's fun. Like, bump and rub, that's racing. That's what it is. That's more interesting to me than having 3 tracks, like 3 car lengths ahead of you and then nobody else around you. I don't feel like that's racing. I feel like close-up competitive racing is racing.
So are you trying to tell me that your 3rd win, you're a little disappointed at the fact that no one was there to battle you for the win?
Or? Honestly, I am kind of disappointed there was nobody there to battle me for the win, because how I was driving, it probably would have been very interesting if we had a battle for the win. Because I was on rails that night. Like, I actually was locked in, zoned in. I was ready to go.
That's funny.
So that would have been a good night.
Well, guess what? The beautiful thing is you're 18. You're still 18, right?
I'm 19 now.
You're 19 now. You just recently had a birthday, so you're still very young. And I think you have plenty of opportunity for that to happen at some point.
Yeah, I hope so. Hopefully.
So we mentioned Mark just a little bit ago. Mark, for those who don't know, is actually your first cousin, and I did not know that until your mother made it clear to me over Facebook Messenger one night, and I had no clue.
Yeah.
I knew that you guys were close friends, but
Hmm.
blood. There's blood relation between you two. So
Yeah.
even more important, when does Mark start coming into the picture as part of your guys' race program?
Well, Mark would go to the races, and my family would all come and support me. And then, uh, Mark's stepdad Ray said said to us that he goes, I want to get a car for Mark. So he started looking and looking, and then he ended up getting a car. And when we looked at this car, we brought it to my house, and then we tore it all apart. And it just wasn't safe. You know, it would take more time and work to make it safe than we had. So he ended up buying that car off of Casey. He had Casey's car, and then we got that car going for him. And like I said, me and my dad and Ray and Mark, we work on all the cars. Those are the four people that mainly are in the garage, I should say, working on the cars all the time.
And you say Casey, you mean Casey Grumling?
Yep.
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 Is that by chance the car that he won his track championship in?
No, that's one of the Catellas cars.
Okay. All right. So
That's the car he had after that.
I gotcha. So a good piece of equipment, you got that. And what, from your standpoint, we could talk to Mark about it for himself, but from your standpoint, how do you feel that he's adjusted and kind of gotten acclimated to things?
He's getting better. He's starting to listen finally. Like, he's hard headed. That runs in the family. So trying to get him to understand what to do and how to drive, he's getting faster. Like, before he wrecked, he was doing really good. And like I said, he's getting there. He just got to keep working on it and be smooth at the wheel.
Yeah. And he's younger than you at this point. I think he's 16, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
still plenty of time to learn. And does it kind of remind you of where you were at 16 racing?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, I see him. He's kind of close to me, so I talk to Mark a lot. We work together a lot. We'll always work on trucks and stuff together, or anything we have to. So, like, I try to teach him and show him the right ways instead of doing stuff the wrong way. So he's getting there.
Yeah, and last year prior to that wreck, I think you could kind of see it too. A little bit more of a smoother driver.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like, at least in 2021, when I can recall seeing it, there were some instances where it was just you could just tell the inexperience, and that's all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just simply inexperience and trying to learn the
Mm-hmm.
ropes and get some seat time. But as he's gained that seat time, I agree with you. He's gotten to that point where it is more of a smoother drive and more consistent finishes. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see him kind of step into the role that you're in, where you're a competitor. You're a true points champion, win on a weekly basis competitor.
Yep. Like, this year, he's going to have a whole new car. So he's pretty much starting from scratch. So we got to set the car up, and he's got to start all over again.
So again, reminiscent to kind of what you went through, where you got to start all over again. So it's not like you guys are unfamiliar to this process.
Yeah, basically, like, car sitting on the porch right now. I'm looking at it right now.
That's funny.
But, yeah.
So plans going forward, 2023, obviously you had your car at the World of Wheels car show. So we know that you're going to be a hobby stock competitor again next season. So what are you looking to improve upon for 2023? What are some of the goals do you have established for yourself this year coming up?
Well, obviously the obvious, hopefully to get some more wins and just be competitive and have a good season. Hopefully keep the car in one piece.
That's a good start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, last year we kind of got to see the raw end of that deal, where a lot of cars did not stay in one piece. And it wasn't just the hobby stocks; it was almost every division. It seemed like for a few weeks there, consistently, there was at least one car really taking some massive, and not just race cars, personal vehicles were just getting just abused. And it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, that is a part of racing. These things can happen, and that's kind of the thrill of the sport, in a way, in a sick kind of way. That is the thrill of the sport.
I can say one thing. I used to say before I drove a race car, the best thing about watching races was the wrecks. That's what I used to say. But
and back in the
now
day,
you drive a car that's completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it's your skin in the game, it's a little bit of a different story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Back in the day, I mean, for example, I went to, I think it was, there was a driver meetup. I want to say it was like Greater Latrobe area, a driver meetup where, Speedway in the past, and you look at some of the nostalgic stuff that they had on display there, some of the racing programs from back in the 60s and 70s, and that's part of their advertisement. That's part of what they were
Hmm.
trying to sell was the accidents and the stuff that can happen that,
Hmm.
people today would probably shy away from and run away. That's not stuff that you should be pushing in advertising, but that's kind
Hmm.
of what they did back then to try to draw some people in.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever you can do to get people's attention. It's always trying to get somebody's attention. You know, if you can get the people's attention, you're going to bring the people to the track.
Yeah. Yeah, and now the challenge is let's not shine a light on the negativity and the unsettling things that we may experience at the races, but let's try to promote it in a better light. A prime example: the hobby stock division coming down to 3 drivers battling it out for a championship on championship night. Like that's the kind of stuff that you guys naturally just produce that we can feed off of and create good stories off of. You guys are the storytellers, or I guess you guys are the story. You're providing the story. I just kind of have to tell it to people and make it seem interesting. So I have the easy
Yeah.
part in this whole thing.
And the weird part about it is you never know what the story is going to be because it's always different. Every night's different.
Yeah, it's just,
Never a night that's going to be the same.
yep, you got that right. Absolutely. So going forward past 2023, obviously you're going to be a hobby stock competitor this year, but maybe in the future, what are you looking to do with yourself? I mean, you love the Monte Carlos, you love racing them. Is this truly what you're going to stick with for the entirety of your career, or do you see yourself eventually moving into
Uh,
something?
I hope to move up to a late model soon.
Okay. Now, are you going to
I
go
don't know.
super rush? What are you thinking?
We're going to start with a crate,
Okay.
604, and then go from there.
Okay.
But hopefully, that's the next step.
So you're starting to kind of make all the stars align, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Trying to.
Yeah. So why rush late models? Why is that sticking out to you?
Well, the main reason because that's where all the money is nowadays. If you see, I mean, all these big races, if you can drive a late model, I mean, you can damn near drive anything. But I don't know. I'm just fascinated by them. They look like a race car, you know,
Hmm.
like a Monte Carlo. Yeah, it looks like a race car, but it's still a street car. Late model, that's a race car. There's nothing about it that's you would find on a car that you would drive on the road.
Hmm.
I should say,
I see what you mean.
which is fascinating. Which is fascinating to me, and just how expensive one of these cars are, and being able to travel to different places and race them is just I. That's what I want to do. I want to travel around and I want to race. That's what I want to. That's what I hope to do.
So why a late model over, say, like a big block modified or a sprint car? Those seem to be other stepping stones for a lot of drivers in your position, younger, looking to move around. But just is it just what you just mentioned before with a late model over? Does sprint car not grab your eye? Do modifieds not really grab your eye at all?
Oh, I'm not a big fan of the modifieds, really. I mean, they're okay, but they're just not really that appealing to me. And they're kind of confusing because they have so many different classes and they all look the same. And then the sprint cars are too fast for me. I'd get hurt in one of those. I would. I don't think I'll ever try one of them. And the late models, the in between. So
Yeah, I feel like it provides that ability to go fast, which is kind of what you like to do, but that side by side competitive bump rubbing is racing kind of racing.
yeah,
You can't rub in a sprint car. You're gonna get
no,
yourself hurt. So,
yeah,
and you talk about competition, that's what you seek, that's what you look for in the hobby stocks. You have
hmm,
plenty of it, but when it comes to rush
hmm,
late model racing, you have it now, and the future looks
hmm,
bright for that division as well. So I think you're
yeah,
going to have it whenever it comes time for you to move into that division. So
hmm,
yeah, I mean, I can see the clear reason as to why. I'm just kind of curious, why not anything else? But it seems to me that, I mean, that's the closest thing that's going to resemble out of any other options of moving up. That's going to be the closest thing that resembles what you currently drive. So it kind of makes sense.
yeah. And when you think about it, I mean, it's just as much. So, like, if you say if I stepped up from the next class up, we go to sportsman. Those cars, I mean, when you get down to it, you're paying just as much for one of those cars, if not more, than you are for a late model.
And by sportsman, you're talking about a pro stock, right?
Yeah, a pro stock. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're a
So
sportsman modified, so it kind of throws people off.
yeah,
But yeah, that's like the traditional one other definition of what a pro stock is: pure stock, pro stock. But
yeah.
yeah, yep,
But you're getting into you're gonna have just as much, if not more, because those are open motors. You can do so much more to those cars. It's like a Monte Carlo on crack, basically, if you think about it. I mean, it's insane. You're paying, you got almost 40 grand in the car when you can get a late model chassis for 20 and put a crate motor in it and be ready to go for, like, let's say 30 grand. So I mean, when you do the numbers, it's easier just to go into the late model, and you can travel with a late model more and go to big races and make a lot of money if you're competitive.
yeah. I can see that. And the beautiful thing is too is with Rush being a weekly competitor, with Rush late models being a weekly competitor at Pittsburgh, you see them
Yeah.
tenfold every time. So you kind of have some familiarity there, and
Mm-hmm.
again, people are willing to help. So if you have questions,
Yeah.
you got guys there that can at least put you in the right direction or at least guide you.
Yeah.
And if you're buying a Rocket chassis, you got Rocket at your disposal. If you're buying a
Yep.
Longhorn, you have people to pick their brain. Whereas currently in
Mm-hmm.
a hobby stock, they didn't build that bad boy on a jig. They did, well, they did
No.
back in wherever they built Chevys back in the mid 1800s, or not mid 1980s. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a little bit of a different story now.
Yeah. I don't think there's one hobby stock out there that is the same. Every car is different.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's just,
talking to the Catellus, because they've gone through like 5 or 6 of those bad boys. But you're right;
Mhm.
that's exactly what they say. Is every single
Mhm.
one handles different. You're never going to
Every
get
car
a
is
consistent
different.
feel.
Yep. Every car is different. Like, for example, talking about Mark,
Yep.
last year I let him get in my car for hot laps because he wanted to try it out, because I wanted him to try it out and see if it helped him, because if it helped him, then I could make his car more like mine to make it better for him. And he got in it, and when he came back in, he said the first thing he said, "This thing handles like a dream." He said it's like it's on rails. I said, "Well, that's what you got to tell me. You got to help me to get your car set up like that. I don't know what the car is doing, so you got to explain it to me." And ever since then, that's when he's finally learning. He's got to talk to me about it for us to get the car to set up. Like, I can't just guess on what he wants. I got to know what he needs, which
Yeah,
is nice.
and I think that's part of the learning process, because perhaps he doesn't know exactly how to explain what he's feeling out
Hmm.
there. Where
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough.
Hmm.
You just kind of got to get a grasp of what it's like to race at things, and learn that lingo, learn that nomenclature, if you will,
Hmm.
to get an idea of how to communicate what you're feeling. And the other part of it is having that knowledge of what adjustments to make. And he's kind of learning all of it all at once, the same way you learned it,
Hmm.
you and your father. And
Yep.
fortunately for him, he's got a little bit of a database to help build based off of what you guys have already established.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it's just him comprehending the knowledge, basically.
Yeah. Yep. So that's entertaining. It's good to know that the future isn't just going to be hobby stocks. Not that that's a bad thing if you chose to do the hobby stocks, but
Well, don't worry, the hobby stock isn't going to go nowhere. She'll
you're
be sitting
you're
here.
gonna pull double duty some nights.
I might put the old man in it. You don't know.
There you go. There you go. You better be careful though. You might want to let him show you up at all.
Oh, I don't know about that. He had to get his own car to do
There you go.
that.
Not out of the realm of possibilities. You can find those bad boys around once in a while.
Yeah, I got one sitting just in case.
There you go. It's always good to have a backup plan.
Yep.
So sponsors that make this all happen for you. Actually, before we get to sponsors, let's talk about World of Wheels, because again, you were front and center, pretty much right on the front row there next to the PPMS booth. You were a
Mhm.
busy man that weekend, whether it was cramping wrists from signing all the autographs that you signed, or whether it was your back hurting from lifting all those kids into your race car. You were a busy man. Talk to me about your World of Wheels experience.
It was awesome, man. I mean, that's my favorite part about racing, is seeing all the kids come and just want to sit in the race cars and just admire the race cars. I love it. There's nothing like it, and that's in any type of racing.
And people asked for my feedback, and they said, "What do you think of the event?" And I said, at the very end of the day, no matter what, what we did was we put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces, and we made a
Yep.
lot of people happy. And at the end of the day, that's what racers do. And
Hmm.
whether or not we see a return on anything at the track, it really doesn't matter, because we expose a lot of people to the sport of dirt track racing. And I think that's what a lot of the drivers really appreciated too, was the opportunity to not only represent the track, but to represent the sport of dirt racing. That was
Hmm.
the beauty of the entire weekend from my standpoint.
Yeah. The coolest thing about that weekend is actually just a couple days ago, I got a Facebook message from somebody that was there, and it was that kid that you interviewed with the Steelers jersey. I don't know if you remember that.
Kid I interviewed with the Steelers jersey. I probably should remember this.
But
Was it
him and his
the young kid? The young kid.
yeah, the young kid
Okay,
with
I
his
remember.
father.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually commented me and he told me he texted me and said we've been watching a bunch of your old races and said the kid's fascinated with the car, loves it, and we'll definitely be there this year. We'll definitely come out and watch the races, which I thought that was crazy because I never thought that I'd ever have somebody just randomly text me like that and just say that. I mean, it was I lost for words, honestly.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing. And
it was crazy.
you're not the first person who has told me that someone saw something at the car show and said, "Oh, we live 5 minutes from the track, we live 10 minutes from the track, and it just
Hmm.
so happens that we know three people who are associated with the track, so we're definitely going to be there this year because we had no clue that track existed before this happened."
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it you know it's not just that, it's multiple instances where people now have an idea that we exist, and
Hmm.
that's just one of the prime examples. That makes me really happy to hear, Matt, because I think
Yeah.
that's really cool that we impacted a young kid's life, and maybe
Hmm.
we put that in his brain now that he's got to get into this thing when he's old enough.
I hope so. That's the goal.
That's really cool, man. So that's cool. Any other stories that stick out to you from Mortal Wheels? I think one of the things that sticks out for me for you, I told you, I said when the time comes for them to open up those garage doors and they start firing up everyone's engines to get all the drive out cars out of there, have fun, man. And you were one of
Yeah.
them. You started
Yeah.
that bad boy up and started revving it up. So not too many
Had to.
people can say they started their engines in the David L. Lawrence Convention Center in Pittsburgh, but you were one of them.
Definitely loud.
It was funny. There was a Yanko, I think it was like a Camaro, right across parked from us, and
Oh yeah.
he had some wheelie bars on it, and
Yep.
he started his car up, and he just kind of looked at me. You
Yep.
were like, "Nope, I don't got it."
Nope. I smelled that methanol and I was like, "Yep, not for me."
So I mean, I certainly, like, I'm not a gearhead. I can admit that full heartedly. I have a great appreciation for those who are, and for those who can make
Mhm.
it happen and be that mechanically inclined. It's just not me. And but I could tell the smile on your face, in anybody's face, just looking around and taking it all in on move out when all those engines are firing up, and when everybody had that opportunity for themselves to fire up their car and let her eat a little bit.
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
it was a pretty cool experience. The move out, a little bit of a stressful situation for a lot of you drivers, but inevitably that little moment before the move out process started was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, everybody's got to show off their toy. That's how it is.
That's what they're there for, not just the racing, but to show them
Yeah.
off every once in a while.
Yeah. Got to show it off.
So sponsors, let's go ahead and get to that point now. People who help make this happen for your race team, sponsors and people both that you would like to thank for this opportunity.
Well, I want to thank all my upcoming sponsors for this season: Hot Dogs, Cozy Enterprises, Adam Solar Rides, Advanced Auto, Sean Nimi at Snap On Tools, Viber's Garage, Sheer Motors, Our Cars Auto Detailing, Paul's Auto Body and Custom, and JD Designs.
How about that? A little bit of a list prepared there, or is that right
Yeah,
off the top of the head?
I had a list.
It's always good to help a helping hand. But what about the people that help make this event happen too, or your program happen too? You mentioned your dad. You
Hmm.
mentioned your uncle. I guess that would technically be your uncle Ray, and then
Hmm.
your cousin Mark. I'm sure you
Hmm.
have other supporting casts that help make it possible as well.
I want to thank my whole family. My mom and dad, obviously, big support. My girlfriend Adriana, my uncle Mo, and the rest of my family and friends, and everybody that helps.
What about racers at the track that have made an impact for your career as well? Do you have any drivers or other competitive teams that have helped you along the way?
Definitely, Carly and them, Carly Kovacs, their team helped us a lot. Jake Simmons, like I said, Jake helped us tremendously. I mean, I can't tell you how many times he's been over, like, will come over and help us scale the car, or tell us we need to do this because that's not going to work, or just doing final adjustments. I mean, those guys have helped out so much that I don't think we'd be where we were if we didn't have those guys help.
Gotcha. So how about that? I think we've gone on pretty long enough here, just shy of an hour at this point. So let's go ahead and wrap some things up here. But Matt, really appreciate your time this evening. We look forward to seeing what you have in store for us for 2023. Hopefully a successful endeavor. I know you say that you don't race for championships. You pretty much race for wins and race for the sheer fact of competition. But hey, maybe you'll get a points championship out of that. But only time will tell. And we look forward to seeing how that story unfolds.
I hope so. I'm glad for you having me.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you later, and good luck in the 2023 season.
All right. Thank you.